Hi, it's Adam from Zero Friction Cycling and welcome to episode 4. So today I'm going to be focusing on immersive waxing because that's probably one of the most polarizing parts of chain lubrication in the lubrication world. So yeah, last episode we talked a bit about the main lubricant types and the maintenance side, and really stepping into the immersive waxing today because I guess there's a bit more involved than just dripping something onto your chain, as people are probably used to with their normal wet lubes or drip lubes. So immersive waxing, it's often put into, I guess I could categorize it as to whether or not people are going to ever look at immersive waxing. Probably there's 3 main types of customer or potential customer you see on that side. So there's one, which was me, which as soon as I sort of found out about immersive waxing, it seemed captain obvious to me as to why it would be, clearly a lot better versus a drip lube. Others, it will immediately sort of, I guess come to their mind that the idea of popping their chain off every time they need to re-lubricate it and put it into a pot of molten wax is completely batshit crazy and something that they're just, why on earth would anyone do that? And the third type really is, I guess, those that are what I'd call a slow burn. It does mentally click that, they can sort of understand that, yes, it's really probably going to be a lot better than just dripping a lube on each time, but can I make that step? Can I make the transition to taking my chain off every time and sticking it in a pot? Is that for me? Will I be able to sort of keep up? So, and there's more, I'd say, voodoo and misconception out there on the internet and on YouTube about immersive waxing than probably any other topic in cycling I can think of. And so, unfortunately, immersive waxing can get a bit of a bad reputation or an incorrect sort of rap based on a lot of the poor information that comes up when you say punch waxing chain into YouTube. Hopefully over time this video is going to come up more and you'll get the proper information that's been sort of properly independently tested and has actual facts to back it. So so I guess we'll move into a few of the main errors and things that come up when people do look into the immersive waxing is if they go down a do-it-yourself path, which is sort of fairly common because that's what a lot of the videos on immersive waxing will sort of can lead you to. Just be, I guess, aware that your cheap waxes, so your cheap paraffin from your hardware store or eBay that costs you bugger all per pound, they have a very high mineral oil content, and so they do get very dirty and gunky quite quickly. So a lot of the time people will try the immersive waxing, have a really poor experience and think, this waxing cape is pretty crap. The other thing is people buying sort of candles, which tend to be even worse. Candles often will contain other impurities such as soy and palm oil. And again, it's a really poor outcome. And so if you try it and it's crap, you'll tend to, think it's crap forever, tell all your friends that it's crap. And that just leads to, I guess, a whole lot of people missing out on possibly going down a path that could really save them a ton of maintenance time, huge amount of sort of friction and wear, day in, day out. So there are a few reasons why immersive waxing with a top proven wax is pretty much unbeatable. It has a couple of unassailable advantages. So to start with, we'll do some, and won't nerd out too much for you, but if we do some sort of basic kind of math. So let's say you've got a lubricant that you tend to use and you're putting that on your chain. Most applications of a lubricant are going to be somewhere in sort of the 5 mil range. So you're going to put about 5 mil of lubricant, and in a lot of cases, half of that might be carrier. So you can sort of halve that number, and that's going to be spread across, on average, about, say, 108 links of your chain. So it's sort of less than 0.05 of a mil per link. And over time, what happens, obviously, your chain is fully exposed to the environment. So dust and stuff is going to get into your chain. Contamination over time is inevitable. So, that's why we were talking about some of the maintenance before. But if you just keep dripping some lubricant on and wiping your chain, you're adding that sort of 0.05 mil per link. Over time, the ratio of contamination to lubricant will just continue to get worse and worse and worse in your chain until, obviously, at some point you should be doing some maintenance. With immersive waxing, what's happening is every time you take your chain off, you're putting it in a pot or a bath of basically 400 to 500 mil plus of 100% lubricant. The old coating melts off. Your chain is then recoated in a fresh coating of solid, super slippery wax. And then you've basically reset that back to basically near zero. Over time, obviously every re-wax, you are going to bring a little bit of contamination into your pot, but you can kind of do the maths from before. How long would it take the wax in your pot to get anywhere near like what the sort of ratio of lubricant to contamination is on your chain if you're just always using, adding more lubricant onto the chain. So waxing, its ability to basically 100% reset the contamination and recoat all the parts of your chain in a solid, super slippery coating of wax, that's really what gives it that, I guess, unbeatable sort of day in, day out performance. And the top known waxes, we've got the original gangster of immersive waxing, which is M-Speed Wax. So they really have ruled the roost on immersive waxing for pretty much the last decade. Really now sort of being nicely hotly contested with Silka Hot Melt, which have come out with an absolutely brilliant product. Molten Speed Wax are actually coming out with their new formula, which I'll be testing hopefully fairly soon to see what the true gap is between the original King and the Challenger. Data is up on the website on both of these at the moment, but yeah, there's just, in short, the wear rates that we get, and I see this just over the years, obviously with customers as well. The day in, day out low friction wear rates for immersive waxing, it just smashes basically everything else that's on the market. And yeah, hopefully, I guess that sort of brief explanation before does help explain a little bit why. And then really it's more about, okay, so is it going to take me a whole bunch more time to do it? Is it going to be a little bit beyond me? Can I keep up with it? So I guess the first misconception I would like to cover about immersive waxing is that it does not take more time overall versus pretty much all your other drip lubes. In a lot of cases, immersive waxing will save you a lot of time unless you never ever clean your chain. So the reason is that the cleaning is done by itself when you put it back into the wax pot. It just comes out, your chain comes out of the pot looking brand new every time. It's recoated in a super slippery low friction lubricant, and being solid, it stays super clean. Your entire drivetrain stays super clean. So you've got, I guess, a little bit of time at the front end. It does take you, say, a couple minutes more time to do a re-wax as it does to just drip some lubricant onto your chain and wipe a chain. But you don't have any of the time at the back end, in terms of trying to keep up with, cleaning your drivetrain, especially if you're using a wet lube that's always going black and you've got to find time to solvent clean your chain and clean off your cassette and chainring. So it's literally just time spent a little bit differently at the front end. So we'll be taking you through, I guess, what is involved in a re-wax, and in a future episode as well, I'll cover off more of, I guess, the frequently asked sort of questions about immersive waxing. But the main message is going to be really that the top waxes, they are super refined. So they're refined down to basically near zero mineral oil content, which is why, as in episode 3, we discussed that you can basically do a great clean if you've done a full wet ride just by boiling up the kettle and melting the old wax coating off, because they're just a super refined wax base with some really top friction modifiers in them, which is what makes them also pretty much the fastest lubricant options in the world. So yeah, there's a bunch of great advantages to immersive waxing, which is why it's always been sort of zero friction cycling's #1 recommended approach. And the other misconception that has come up a lot is that immersive waxing is not suitable for those who often ride in wet conditions, that you should use a wet lube. So in the previous video, I did discuss some of the wear rate comparisons between, say, your top chain coating and wax lubricants versus wet lubricants. And the data is very clear and the testing is very clear that the waxing is going to give you still much lower friction in those conditions. The catch is, or I guess the reason why it comes up a bit, that immersive waxing is not suitable for if you ride in the wet all the time, is that it's one of these things where you can't, say, do a wet ride with an immersive wax, come home, park your bike, just leave it for a day and come back and go and ride. Because what will happen is the wax does get abraded off the outside of the rollers of your chain first. Your rollers are made of a pretty high carbon steel, so they will oxidize or start rusting quite quickly. So if you are using immersive waxing, when you get home from a wet ride, you do need to either give it a boiling water flush rinse dry in the wax pot, or just simply, if that's too much of an issue, simply just pop it off and put it in your wax pot and everything is perfectly fine. So with a wet lube, sure, you can just go on a ride, come home, your stuff's all coated with, I guess, your wet lube oil, and it's not going to oxidize or start rusting on you. The trouble is, though, it's just been hosed with a whole bunch of, pretty gritty contamination. And so, whilst you don't have to do that, I guess, sort of care when you get, back from your ride or soon after you get back, if you just keep doing that, what you've got on your chain really becomes, I guess, a grinding paste masquerading as your chain lubricant. So really, if you wanted to reset that contamination back to sort of near zero again after a wet ride, it's a heck of a lot easier to pop your chain off and put it in a pot and turn a pot on and just let the wax melt and take care of everything for you, as it would be to have to try to solvent clean your wet lube chain. So this is where I guess it's just sort of time spent differently. With waxing, you've just got that little bit of time at the front end to save a whole bunch at the back end. And really, the harsher the conditions that you ride in, the more benefit you get from running, an immersive wax. It's just going to save you a whole lot of cleaning time and really quite a huge amount of frictional wear. It's just so much easier to keep your chain low frictional wear with an immersive wax versus say especially a wet lube. So they're really, I guess, the main misconceptions that I wanted to run through. So beware a lot of the DIY cheap wax advice. It's just not going to lead you to a great place. These bags of waxes last, they last you at least 10,000 kilometers of super low friction running before you need to worry about changing them. So that by the time you faff around with some cheap gunky wax, you just got to sort of weigh up, is that worth it? Misconception 2 really is that immersive waxing is not suitable if you frequently ride in the wet. So really, it's so much easier to take care of that chain post-wet ride versus if you're running a wet lube, which is going to become very high friction very quickly, and you'd need to do a lot to reset that. So if you're, I guess, ride a lot, so let's say you're riding every day in the wet and you think there's just no way I can come home and pop my chain off every day and stick it in a wax pot. So this is where other considerations may come in. So you've got two, I guess, really top options that if you're that type of rider that's really hammering, you're an intrepid all-weather rider all the time. So tip number 1 is to run multiple chains. So if you've got, I guess sooner or later you're going to need a new chain anyway. So pre-buying your next chain, it costs you no more. So, and if you ride a lot in harsh conditions, that next new chain is never too far away, especially if you're replacing it when you should, to make sure you're not going to be wearing out your other components. So pre-buying your next chain or even your next 2 chains is a really, really smart way to go if you're frequently riding in harsh conditions. What you can do if you don't have time to sort of immediately do that re-wax, you can get home, once you've had your shower and warmed up, whatnot, pop that chain off, wrap it in a microfiber cloth. So don't put it in plastic. Plastic is like a rust catalyzer. Put it in a microfiber cloth, just wrap it up, and that will keep it from starting to oxidize for a number of days. Pop your next chain on, same thing. So, and then after you've done sort of 2 or 3 days, you can then re-wax 2 or 3 chains at once. So that is extremely time efficient. You don't have to sort of do one and then another day do another. It's just, you can do them all at once as long as you've got the fill level of wax in your pot. 2 or 3 chains at once, easy as. The other option is not as good as that. Immersive waxing is always going to be king for running low friction day in, day out. But the top options out these days, so such as your Silka Super Secret Drip or your Ceramic Speed UFO or your True Tension Tungsten All Weather, these are top options where they're pretty much designed to be able to run with immersive waxing. So if you're still just sort of, I guess, going on the one chain, you've ridden in the wet, so you need to take care of the chain to some degree because you can't just leave it or the rollers will start to oxidize. Add on your wax compatible lubricant and work that in and let that have its overnight set. And then you just basically continue doing that until you get to the time, whether it be the weekend or whatnot, basically till you get that first opportunity where you can actually do an immersive re-wax. So that's really I guess the main points to cover off. Really why I'm personally very strongly in the immersive wax camp, and 300 odd thousand kilometers of control testing later, as well as a huge amount of customer data that I get to see as well from all the racing customers, which I have from road, cyclocross, mountain bike, time trial. We have a heck of a lot to back up that immersive waxing is king. If it can be for you, And it is easier to make it be for you now that we have lubricant choices to, I guess, complement immersive waxing that we didn't have, I guess, that sort of 18 months, 2 years ago, with these new products that are out that you can add to your wax chain if you need to. If popping off each time to immersively re-wax is going to be something that you're not sure you're comfortable in being able to stay on top of, you can use those lubricants as your re-lube in between and then go to that immersive wax. So yeah, immersive wax every time is king by far, and multiple chains can be a great choice for especially high mileage riders if you're frequently riding in harsh conditions. If multiple chains isn't your thing, but you still like the sound of immersive waxing, not sure if you can do it all the time, then you've got those other lubricant options that you can use. And that's still going to be, I guess, versus what's occurring with your stereotypical wet lube chain and what's involved solvent cleaning wise to try to keep that low friction when you're frequently riding in harsh conditions. You're still going to be miles ahead taking that option versus your, I guess, what's typically been pushed for a long time is that if you ride all the time in wet, choose a good wet lubricant. Probably the only other point really to cover off as to where immersive waxing or waxing is sometimes seen as not suitable for wet weather riding is treatment lifespan. So what's happening with the solid lubricants and chain coating type lubricants is that the water's bringing in this abrasive contamination, and this contamination is physically abrading that solid coating off. So I guess like all lubricants, the harsher the conditions, the shorter the treatment lifespan of that lubricant is going to be. And there are some wet lubes that, I guess that they're sort of simply made, to last a very long time, and they don't get washed off. So they can have, I guess, a very long treatment lifespan in harsh conditions. And so that's where I think it gets a bit sort of mixed in that they may not be suitable. But really, you've just got to take into account, what is my riding? So am I riding for, 60 miles or 100 kilometers in the wet? In which case, you're not going to have a treatment lifespan issue. Am I going to go for a 300 kilometer ride and it's going to be really harsh conditions in the wet? Then yes, you're going to have a treatment lifespan issue with a solid wax that you may not have with a top wet lube like a Synergetic or a Nix Friction. So, there are, I guess, some certain cases where a wax lubricant isn't going to be suitable if it's a really long stint in harsh conditions, because the treatment lifespan isn't going to last through that. And that's where you may need to look for a wet lubricant choice for that particular ride. But in most cases, most times, day in, day out, training and riding, commuting, racing, whatever it may be, your riding is not going to exceed the treatment lifespan of these types of lubricants. And so it's just literally just knowing that little bit of information on how best to, I guess, maintain, or what you should do to maintain your chain post-wet riding, especially if you can't re-wax every time. What are your top options to get around that sort of time constraint or time fear? And that, I guess, now armed with that knowledge, it's really, I guess, a time to sort of ponder, should I have a look at this even if I do ride a lot in the wet? Because it is going to save you a huge amount of chain wear and drivetrain component wear, and just ease of maintenance versus what you're going to expect or what you experience with trying to keep a wet lubricant low friction if you ride frequently in such conditions. So there's been really those a couple of main points regarding immersive waxing versus your wet lubes to cover off. So one, just general use, and two, if you do ride a lot in harsh conditions, that it is a bit of a misnomer that it's not suitable for that type of riding. So we'll move from here to actually demonstrating, I guess, what's involved in an immersive wax. So this will be also part of, I guess, helping you decide, is an immersive wax process for you, or that choice for you, or are you going to stick with the wet lube and just do your best at maintaining a low friction chain as best you can using the best wet lube choices that are out there. So that'll do for the rambling part, and we'll move to showing you how to do an immersive re-wax. By the way, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and other YouTubey type things, like share with your friends. So that'll keep you up to date with the latest low friction news and hints and tips. And also put any comments down below, and I can try to look at those and take them into account for future episodes.